We get the first glimpse of Joel and his family in the game titled The Last of Us on the 26th September 2013, when a deadly fungal epidemic spreads through Austin, Texas. Joel, his child Sarah, and his sibling Tommy watch the beginning of a cataclysmic catastrophe that would drastically alter Joel's life. The deadly fungus took over the brain processes of its host body, effectively murdering the host and transforming them into something of a zombie-like husk. The fungus then guided the victim to a suitable site where it could continue to multiply. Within The Last of Us, the players will come across a variety of these sad infected souls. So let's take a deep dive into these deadly infected beings and their biology. Each type of infected bear varied qualities based on the duration they've been infected for and even their surroundings. So without further ado, let's dive into these details. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a very small click for you, but for us, it sure means a lot, so we'd really appreciate it. Thank you, and let's get into it. Which humans got infected in The Last of Us? And what is the infection? The infected in the video game The Last of Us are humans that have been severely transformed by a parasite fungus called cordyceps brain infection. The fungus multiplies within the craniums of its victim, destroying higher brain processes and transforming infected individuals into ferocious, violent beasts. According to the plot of The Last of Us, in September 2013, the CBI disease spread fast through the United States of America. Attempts to stop the sickness from spreading outside of the USA borders were futile, and it quickly grew to epidemic levels, threatening to annihilate the entire human race. With civilization on the edge of implosion, the governments of the world took extraordinary measures to safeguard the remaining people. In the United States, quarantine zones were constructed where uninfected people could live, albeit living conditions were continually growing worse, owing to supply shortages and the status of martial law. Outside of these zones, the infected walked freely, contaminating the environment with lethal spores as the fungus grew within their bodies. When people are exposed to a mutant strain of Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, this fungus targets the brain. It begins to modify the host's behavior. The host will subsequently go through several phases of infection, each more hazardous than the last. The illness can also be transmitted directly by contact with infected individuals or through their corpses, that is, the contagious spores produced by the cordyceps and discharged from the host's body upon death. Spore production is the final step of the infected's life cycle. This decomposing carcass acts as a breeding habitat for the fungus, allowing it to spread all through the ecosystem. When an infected is near death, it will seek for dark, wet areas to die in. While the host may have died, the fungus will continue to exist. People in quarantine zones are largely safe since spore concentrations cannot build up in locations with sufficient ventilation, which means that the only sites with high spore poisonings tend to be subterranean or abandoned structures. The fungus should be in a living condition for it to infect a human host, and the illness does not transform dead victims who get in touch with it. The sick are all vulnerable to fire. Infected people have subsequently been subjected to a unique mutation caused by a particular strain of cordyceps. Growths emerge from the orifices of human hosts over time, altering their physical appearance. Their teeth are completely rotted and jagged. The fungus also tends to glow in the dark. Later stages cause their body to expand and additional fungal growths to appear on their skin. When the host is murdered or dies as a result of advanced fungal development, the fungus spreads throughout the whole body, releasing spores. As the fungus grows in the brain, sufferers gradually lose their capacity to reason and start to behave strangely. The infected will attack or consume any person they come across, relying on distorted instincts. The fungus travels to the host's pupils, covering and blinding them as it develops. They develop a rudimentary kind of echolocation to detect prey, resulting in a characteristic clicking sound. If the host is too severely wounded, the fungus will eventually kill it, generally in a closed-off location where the fungus may spread further. While the infected have a better pain threshold than a typical person, they are nonetheless vulnerable to conventional afflictions. When they're not too busy chasing after survivors, an infected will groan in anguish owing to the overgrowth of fungus that is deforming its body. The infected may appear sorrowful or anxious as they strike. This might imply that the initial and second phase infected are conscious of the things that they are doing but unable to control them. Because gunshots might startle an infected person, they may experience panic during the initial stages of the infection. However, most of their humanity is wholly destroyed by the final stages, and most humanistic feelings and characteristics cease entirely. But let's go ahead and move on and explore every existing variety of the infected in the Last of Us timeline. Runners. Runners are infected persons in the initial stages of infection, and they are by far the most prevalent type of the infected that players will face in The Last of Us. These infected experience relatively mild physical changes as they are in the early stages of infection. Their eyes appear red as they bleed, and little lesions and warts form around the areas of their head and neck. Runners retain most of their typical physical traits, making them the most similar to regular zombies by design. Runners are frequently seen resting, hunching down, and writhing in pain. These infected are not afraid to fight, and when disturbed, they will often run towards the victim at an athletic gait. While their reasoning abilities are damaged, runners frequently appear to be relatively docile. They will not fight, even when its prey is directly within reach. This indicates that these infected still have some self-awareness and are battling the fungus's grips on their minds. However, the runners will respond aggressively if they are frightened by unexpected movements or sudden noises. Although having a more substantial pain tolerance than the non-infected humans, runners can be slaughtered just as quickly as non-infected people. Runners will attempt to melee hit or grab players. Runners become a lot more manageable after time when the player knows what to do with them and what their characteristics are. Runners can also see and hear quite well. Stealth is essential if there are many of them in a small space. Joel's own hands, Ellie's blade, a melee weapon, any pistol, or a regular strength kill can all be used to eliminate them. If too many of them are in close proximity, dashing off to a safer place to pick down a couple of them at a time is the best choice probably. It also is important to remember that if the player is not cautious, runners will swiftly swarm, assuring the player's death. Stalker. An infected person will reach the second phase of infection between a week and a year after initial infection. At this stage, the infected have lost all signs of human conscience and will kill others without hesitation. These swift beings will also exhibit physical indications of illness with spores sprouting from their heads and bodies. Stage 2 infectees are more covert and prefer to remain hidden in dark places if they are noticed from a distance. They will hide in the darkness and dive behind obstacles, waiting for the best opportunity to attack on prey, which is why they are known as stalkers. Stalkers, unlike runners, are far more systematic. They are cunning and adept hunters, waiting to burst forth from their hiding place and attack. They are extremely rare, appearing only in a few afflicted regions in The Last of Us. The host begins to exhibit fungal characteristics throughout their bodies, most notably on their face and head. The growth of fungal developments from their head distinguishes stalkers from runners. As the sickness develops, they still have the pace of a runner, but with some additional alterations. The fungus will frequently conceal a portion of the infectee's vision, restricting sight, but boosting their perception of sound. They move fast on all fours, preferring to hide behind massive objects or just around corners. Stalkers are extremely tough to deal with since they are difficult to entice out of the hiding places, especially in dark settings. It's not that they are adamant about killing, but they certainly have a creep element that the others just simply do not. A stalker isn't much more challenging to kill once engaged than a runner, although they tend to reside in packs. Players will also be unable to enter stealth or stay hidden from stalkers, implying that they will constantly be aware of their whereabouts. If necessary, players should utilize listening mode to see where stalkers appear or kill them from afar when they peer from behind things. Clicker. Clickers are among the most well-known of the infected, frequently appearing in advertising imagery and gameplay. They are easily identified because their skulls have been enveloped by fungal growth, revealing the lower jaw. When a host turns into a clicker, the fungus has nearly fully taken over the exterior of the body. Now at the infection's intermediate stage, clickers are hideous and brutal to kill. These beasts are mighty and capable of destroying any player with a simple swipe. At this phase, clickers are entirely blind and rely on rudimentary sorts of echolocation to identify prey, creating unique clicking noises that give them their name. The cordyceps virus has totally consumed these horrid beasts. They are much tougher than humans and hardly flinch when struck, and they'll utilize their strength to quickly overwhelm human victims and destroy them with a jugular bite. Clickers are more difficult to kill at later stages of infection, rendering melee strikes unreliable. They are even more resistant to weapons. The fungus on their faces acts as a natural armor, shielding their heads, so shots will only break off bits of the mold. A player should not approach them immediately like they would a stalker or a runner. If a clicker captures a player and they do not have a shiv, they will die. Players may, however, leverage the power of a clicker's inability to see by hurling a Molotov cocktail that will lure in the clickers straight into the flames. The quickest method to eliminate the clickers is in fact with flames. A Molotov cocktail is ideal for this and also incredibly beneficial when you're dealing with a group of clickers. Any clickers around the vicinity will rush to the noise and straight into the flames. A few headshots after that should do the trick if the fire doesn't eliminate them completely from the get-go. To avoid clickers, players must walk gently and silently. To kill them, players need to creep up on them utilizing stealth. Bloater. The bloater, a creature whose physique has bulked out as a result of fungal plates growing all over it, is the infection's last stage. Bloaters are one of the most deadly forms of the infected within the Last of Us environment. Bloaters are substantially more extensive than the average sick person. Infected reach this stage in an arid environment and are easily the most lethal infected variety seen in this game. They can take heaps of damage, kill opponents with a mere melee hit, and charge across the battlefield. The growths act as natural armor, allowing the bloater to resist many hits from the weapons like rifles and shotguns, while melee weapons have little to no impact at all. Bloaters move significantly slower than most other infected due to the fungus encasing their bodies. This enveloping fungus acts as a plethora of armor running through their swollen bodies, making each combat a frenzied race against time. The fungus that covers their body creates mycotocins, which the bloaters can utilize as a weapon by tossing mold pieces at victims, poisoning them. These are known as spore bombs, and they gradually hurt the player the more that they stay within range. They also have superhuman strength and will kill victims instantaneously if they grasp them by tearing open their heads. Bloaters are still pretty hazardous even if a player maintains their distance, because players must use a significant amount of money and ammunition to knock down even one. And it also doesn't help that other types of infections frequently accompany bloaters. Bloaters are incredibly resilient and should never be battled hand-to-hand or with small firearms alone. Flamethrowers, Molotov cocktails, and other types of fire weapons are the most effective means to weaken the bloaters from afar. Once they are weak, they may be taken out using a rifle or a shotgun, but it's still critical to keep a safe distance from the spores. Shambler. Shamblers are part of the new wave of an alternate fourth stage of infected introduced in The Last of Us Part 2. Players first encounter shamblers in the Santa Barbara and Seattle region. Unfortunately, rain is plentiful in Seattle, giving the Pacific Northwest an ideal setting for shamblers. Shamblers look like walking pustule clusters. On top of this, their lips have been trapped, gaping open by the fungus, stopping them from ever being capable of biting. Their arms, however, have not been eaten by the growth, and their pupils are still somewhat visible. Shamblers start out slow but can pick up the pace and move across the space almost as rapidly as a runner. Shamblers are pretty comparable to bloaters. The primary difference would be how they disseminate their spores. The most deadly aspect of shamblers is that they spit a gaseous spores and acid when they are hit or when a player approaches too close, while bloaters launch spore bombs. While they are similar in size and look like bloaters kind of, they appear to lack enormous strength since the players can wrestle them off themselves if grasp. However, their mobility is equally as poor, if not more so, as most survivors are capable to escape them if attacked. But then again, they can reach up and climb over barriers. They are also shown to be significantly more common than bloaters, occasionally traveling even in packs. They are so heavy that you could easily knock opponents off their feet. A Molotov cocktail is the most effective technique to attack a shambler from afar. Because of their quickness, close-range weaponry is not really advised. Pipe bombs are another viable choice since they can help the player to create some space between himself and the shambler. But beating a shambler is challenging enough in and of itself, but once destroyed, it explodes. So, when festering damages are eliminated, they erupt with great power, emitting a swarm of spores that cause significant injury to the player. So be careful. The Rat King. The infected's last stage is a nasty and ugly transformation of the cordyceps brain infection. The Rat King is indeed the source of all nightmares. It is both long-lasting and lethal. The Rat King embodies all of the characteristics diseased phobias. This horrible super monster is not strictly one infected individual, but an aggregation of numerous varieties of the infected in the Seattle region. The Rat King is a fusion of clickers, runners, stalkers, and other infected into one massive monster, and as a consequence, the infected is enormous, multifunctional, and one of a kind. The Rat King is seen only once in the cellar of a hospital level. After striving to flee from the terror of the Rat King, the players finally have to confront it. It appears that the Rat King is composed of some of the first persons ever to be infected by cordyceps brain infection in the town of Seattle, meaning it matured into this form after 25 years of infection. As believed, it originated as a result of being locked in a chamber so densely packed with spores that when the fungal growths erupted and spread, the inflicted fused all into each other. Preserving distance and deploying explosive and fire-based weaponry is very advisable in this case. The Rat King possessed immense power and durability far beyond that of a bloater, as seen by its ability to simply smash through and demolish most of the hospital's lower floors. It was capable of enduring severe damage before dying, and the Rat King can spit corrosive gas significantly faster than its shambler cousins. The most challenging element of combating the Rat King is that of when it takes its injury. The fungus splits, allowing individual infected to break off and attack. It looks like every individual infected linked to the bulk in their own person, as compared to the mob being a unified one. The modified runner or clicker may have additional infected characteristics, such as the capacity to throw spores. The Rat King is sensitive to fire, but needs skill and time to vanquish it. Marvelous verdict. Humanity strived to live in a world full of infected zombies and martial law decades after an epidemic converted the United States into a dismal wasteland, and it has been brilliantly embellished by the game The Last of Us. The hauntingly beautiful game by Naughty Dog is widely regarded as one of the greatest games in the world, combining outstanding graphics, a brilliant storyline, and challenging gameplay. The Last of Us Part 2, fueled by the popularity of the original, made its climactic appearance in June 2020, but got mixed reactions from the fans. The original game presented many sorts of infected like bloaters, clickers, and runners, but this new game included a few additional stages of infection like shamblers. One can only wonder what the game has in store for us in the future and if there will be any more terrifying infected to face in future iterations of the game. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. And in the meantime, have a good one and be safe. Thank you, everybody.